unrest, the unrest, the unrest. Podcast, 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 podcast.
Welcome to the Unrest Podcast. I'm Madeleine Green.
I'm Kaitlin Stansel.
And I'm Carter Coyle. Thanks for joining us. We have a really fun one today for all of our animal lovers. We've got a couple of different stories and fun pet-related things. And if you hear some snacking and smacking in the background, I'm feeding the baby right now. So we're like triple tasking today for the podcast.
You do what you gotta do.
The other Madeleine is getting her yum-yums in.
That's right. So I am you guys know I don't ever check Instagram. That's probably my worst social media keeping up with it. But I hear that Kaitlin has something fun that she sent us that I just haven't seen yet.
So it kind of reminded me of our TikTok Tuesday post about the funny grave markers. And it was this meme that was on Instagram, and it says, someday everyone will be able to immediately pick out all the millennial gravestones because everyone else's will be like loving husband, wings of angels, and ours will say, thank fuck, a very good boy with an eye. 1995 to 2064, nice. And the best one to cap it all off, she died doing what she loved, being murdered. I just love that one. And
I love that. 1995 to 2064. Nice.
And we were laughing about the last one because there was this other TikTok and it was talking about just how women love murder documentaries and how husbands are like, how could you watch this evil stuff? And in the background, it's like, he cut off her eyes, he cut off her nose, he cut off her mouth. And the woman's just like snacking, like can't take her eyes away from the TV screen. And the husband just looking at her in terror.
Literally, that is my life. I'll be watching. I love this podcast. It's like I Survived. And I mean, there's some terrible shit on there. And Matt will be like, how can you listen to this? I'm like, how can you not? I mean, it's so interesting. And you know that these people survived. I mean,
so at least there's like somewhat of a happy ending that you're expecting. Yeah, AJ, I always watch Forensic Files, and AJ's like, turn that off, because he hates the guy's voice. He's like, it's so creepy sounding.
My mom is obsessed with Forensic Files and like is pretty sure she could get away with murder because she's seen so many.
No, actually, I've learned you cannot get away with murder because the forensics will get you. But there's another one out that's called Homicide Hunter. You like him. That's on Hulu. It's awesome.
I've seen that one.
Fran with the suggestions for new shows we need to check out. Love it.
Of a murderer is good.
Yes.
Yeah, that
murderer. That one's a little old news, but we'll take it.
I do love me some killing stuff.
She's
Gotta
the original.
killing stuff.
She's definitely the original murderino in this family.
Well, yeah. I mean, my grandfather was shot in the back of the head and chopped up into pieces and buried in the woods, and my brother-in-law was shot and set on fire. So
you can't just lay that on us in the background. We need to hear this full story.
Yeah, why aren't you?
I'll do that as a story sometime because it is very fascinating.
Holy moly! Yeah, we're gonna have to do a
whole debrief on that.
Yeah, you can definitely cut that out because she was just yelling and Madeline screaming, and this is my life right now.
No, I loved it.
Hi, babe.
All right, so let's jump to our story of the day.
So someone do something.
So on a very different note, let's talk about animal ghosts today. I thought the stories would be easier to find, but there weren't a lot of really specific ones out there. But then I recalled one about a sweet little pup here in downtown Charleston. So I thought, let's focus on dog ghost. And something interesting I found is that their presence can go one of two ways. They're either really friendly ghosts, sweet reminders of former pets, or they are evil and potential warning signs for impending death. So I'm going to break down ghostly sightings for both of those encounters. The first one, though, again, brings us down to downtown Charleston for a little pup named Poogan. You might have heard of him. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea, Kaitlin.
I know. I was like, man, I know I've heard some animal ghost stories before, and that one just immediately popped in my mind. So he's associated with this really well-known and popular restaurant in downtown Charleston, and it's called Poogan's Porch. And the story goes that
Best mac and cheese alert.
Yeah, great brunch. It's amazing. If you're in downtown Charleston, you got to go there. And actually, Poogan is not the only ghost that apparently haunts this restaurant, but I'm not going to talk about the other one right now. The story goes that Poogan was a neighborhood stray in the 1970s. He loved to stop by the house, and eventually this house became the restaurant that it is today. And the people that own the house, they would give him food and water when he would stop by. He might stay a while on their front porch, cool off and relax. And he was just this neighborhood mainstay. Well, eventually the house was sold off. It was bought by the restaurant owners. They renovated it. But Poogan still kept coming along. And this is not the ghost yet. This is the real life Poogan we're talking about. So he continued to show up. He would greet diners as they walked up on the porch.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, and he would be in the restaurant actually walking under the tables, kind of scavenging for food that people might have dropped. Maybe begging a little bit too.
Smart boy.
What I would do.
What kind of dog was it? Do we know?
So I found a little picture of him. He's like this little terrier, white looking terrier. He's super cute and just big enough to fit under the table comfortably.
For some reason, that's what I was picturing him as.
I feel like he looks like the kind of ghost he sounds like he is. You know what I mean? Like he's just such a little sweetie. Yeah.
He looks like a Poogan.
He's curly little hair, floppy, kind of long-haired ears, and just a sweet
you're gonna
guy.
tell us that he's like some evil killer ghost puppy.
No. He's an example of a good dog ghost. So talking about the encounters with him, it sounds like he really kind of kept up this tradition of greeting the diners at Poogan's Porch. Some of the diners claim they feel something brush past their legs beneath the table while they're eating. So he's still kind of scavenging for some little crumbs and snacks from what diners drop on the floor. And what I kind of thought was interesting, a lot of restaurants and places really try to capitalize on their haunted history, but Poogan's Porch, their website doesn't mention his ghost at all. Yeah, but it does say that Poogan became the guardian of the fledgling restaurant. The restaurant family cherished him and he became an institution. And when he died of natural causes in 1979, the building became his monument.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's really sweet.
I love that. So that's an example of a good dog ghost, sweet, friendly, kind of a reminder of a pet that passed away. But dog ghosts also have this evil folklore surrounding them, especially black dogs.
Oh, poor
I know.
black dogs.
And that is kind of,
they're like sneaky.
that's kind of like stuck around, that stigma for shelters and all, even today. It's really hard for shelters to find adopters for black dogs. But
I've always heard it's because like black dogs don't photograph very well, and like people want like cute puppies that'll photograph, which is just like really sad.
yeah,
And we all know black cats also get a bad rap, just saying.
black cats connected to witchcraft in some sense, and black dogs connected to the devil, from what I've discovered. So here's kind of an account of one such black dog. And this account I found started with this quote. It says, "If you meet the black dog once, it'll be for joy. If twice, it'll be for sorrow. And the third time shall bring death." Yeah, so you don't want to encounter these ghosts. So this legend comes from Connecticut, this area called Hanging Hills of Meridian. And these stories have been around for over 100 years, and a lot of accounts of seeing this black dog. But one famous account dates back to the 1890s, and they were studying some rocks near the reservoir up there. And the guy had noticed this little dog standing on a boulder nearby. So when he finally moved on, the little dog kind of trotted eagerly alongside him all the way up. And they eventually took a lunch break and went down to this restaurant. Well, later the dog started following back to his hotel. So he had seen him twice at that point. Well, when they went back up there, up to where they were studying these boulders, they were kind of right near this rock formation that was near a ledge of a cliff, and they noticed the dog approaching them. The dog was said to be wagging its tail excitedly. But what's interesting, though, is when they talk about these black dogs, a lot of times they don't make any sound. So,
Ooh, weird.
They may be looking like they're barking or wagging their tail, but there's no sound coming from them, and they don't leave any footprints behind. So as the dog got closer, one of the men slipped on some ice and plunged to his death off of this cliff. And it was said, after authorities later found his body, that for one of those men, it was the third time they had seen this dog. And the other guy had seen it 2 times. So I imagine that he probably never went back to try to see it for a third time.
Oh my gosh.
That's a pretty famous legend from this Hanging Hills area of Connecticut. But I did do some kind of background research on this folklore surrounding black dogs and what Wikipedia says, if you want to use them as your reference, like I am about to.
Oh, yeah.
That they, have always been mythicized as being this spectral or demonic entity that has primarily been found in the British Isles. A lot of these stories, come from Europe, which is kind of interesting. The black dog is essentially a nocturnal apparition. In some cases, it is considered a shapeshifter. Ooh. And it's very closely associated with the devil. And one reason for that is because it is, I guess, known to guard or thought to guard gateways to hell, or, areas that have like an evil stigma surrounding them.
Oh gosh. Yeah. That's scary. Those are the mean ones.
So not not as cute and friendly as Pugin.
No,
not at all.
And then
it
it says,
reminded me of like Harry Potter. I think
yes,
wasn't Sirius a dog, but he ended up being a good character. But
he was a black dog, yeah. And remember in Harry Potter when they're in Professor Trelawney's class and they're like reading the tea leaves, and
the Grim.
He gets the Grim, and it's like a black dog.
Yes, and there's lots of magical 3s too, and throughout the series. And wasn't there a 3-headed scary dog like guarding the chamber?
That was in the first one, yeah.
Yes, and that dog is a mythical dog as well that guarded the gates of hell. And just really quickly to wrap up the folklore surrounding black dogs, they're also known as hellhounds. Again, these have like a really ominous and hellish supernatural nature to them. They kind of have a better description of what these dogs look like. It says that they feature mangled black fur, glowing red eyes, super strength and speed, ghostly or phantom characteristics, and a foul odor.
They look stinky. They look like they'd have a foul odor.
Stinky.
Yeah.
They don't look super scary though.
Hellhounds.
And it says seeing a hellhound or hearing it howl may be an omen or even a cause of death, guarding the secrecy of supernatural creatures or beings from the world.
That was very interesting, Kaitlin. Thank you for making my animal dreams come true.
You're welcome. Sorry, it probably wasn't what you imagined. What else is interesting is, I talked a lot about black dogs having all of this kind of supernatural connection, but I did find a story, and I didn't have time to really focus on it, but it's out of a national park in Sumter, South Carolina, and apparently there's this big white dog that people see along this certain road there in the national park, and it'll be running beside your vehicle. If you stop, it'll sit in front of your vehicle. And there was one account where this man said when he was 11 or 12 years old, one of their cows had gotten out. And so he was on his pony and was going out, I guess, to find where the cow had gone. And all of a sudden, this dog starts chasing after them. And it's this big, white, furry dog. And so he's like, trying to get away from the dog chasing after him. His pony freaks out, throws him off, throws him into this barbed wire fence. And he gets up and looks around, and the dog's gone.
Whoa.
So that was just one account of that dog, but I thought it was interesting that it was said to be a white dog that haunted that road. That's your friendly story about good and bad dog ghost.
Well, I'm going to share our haunted history, which is more just kind of an in-depth look at pets and animals and their sixth sense for ghosts or supernatural presences, which is kind of cool. But I have to start by pointing out something very weird and coincidental. Kaitlin sent me an article and said, hey, you know, this would be a good one for you to share for haunted history. And I opened it and it's written by a Madeleine. Weird coincidence one, because we already have two Madeleines in our lives, the one who hosts
and on our episode right now.
And yes, my baby. And then I looked at just a minute ago, and this article was published on October 30th, 2020, which is my Madeleine's birthday.
Yay.
That's kind of
Really
weird.
weird.
That's kind of weird.
Now we just need a third coincidence to make it.
Okay, well,
Spooky.
Hopefully we'll find one.
I love October.
It's almost Halloween, October 30th. Anywho, we'll see if we have any more coincidences as we read through these articles, but that's pretty interesting. So this Madeleine is named Madeleine Aguilar, and Madeleine Aguilar works for The Cut, which is this it looks like part of New York Magazine. It's like a really pretty designed website, just for the record. And she said that the name of the article is Can Pets See Ghosts? And she says she loves her dog Cleo very much, but not exactly a canine rocket scientist. I think we all know that can be the case. But she said one night a few years ago, she started staring into an empty corner of her apartment, and a roommate kind of offhandedly said, "Oh, that when they do that, they're seeing a ghost in the corner." And she was like, "Oh, I thought she just like looked at empty walls. I didn't know this." I actually have seen my dog Trix do this before, and it is very creepy. Like, if you ever have a dog who just goes up to a blank wall, like kind of close to it, and just stares, or in a corner, and you're like, hello, and they don't respond. Apparently this is called trancing. Not all dogs do it, but Trix definitely has done it a couple times, and it is really creepy. It is like they are in a trance, and they're not like they're not mad, but they're just kind of there. And I read online when Trix started doing this that apparently, like, if something soft brushes them, like the top of a tree branch or something, it can like put them in a trance state. It's so weird, but look out.
That is
for it.
weird.
Yeah. So anyway, it kind of reminded me of Trix doing that. But on the other hand, they might also be seeing some sort of ghost or figure that we humans cannot see. So this Madeleine started kind of investigating it and tried to reach out to some well-known cat and dog behavior experts. And she actually talked to one, Jackson Galaxy, who has the Animal Planet show My Cat from Hell. And he does happen to believe in supernatural stuff. I haven't seen a lot of that show, but I have seen it a couple times, and it is really awesome. So
unless you have a cat from hell.
No, I have a cat born and raised in heaven who is the most amazing being ever, other than the other Madeleine. Okay, from a purely evolutionary standpoint, he explains, yeah, right. He says, he talks specifically about cats and says the cats have evolved to see things that we as humans just can't. Their eyes see perfectly with the smallest bit of light, and they can hear 6 to 8 times better than we can. And their whiskers are designed to detect everything from like temperature changes to air current changes. So cats are like basically perfectly made if you to detect supernatural type things that maybe humans can't. And that if you find a cat staring at an empty wall, it might be, oh, we just heard a mouse inside of it or heard something fall, but it very well could be that they're picking up and sensing something that we just couldn't. And Galaxy says that his cats are always picking up energies inside his house. So that was kind of interesting. Now, this one I thought the podcast Madeleine would appreciate. Catherine Bozzi, she is an animal communicator who lives in British Columbia. And as you imagine, like animal communicators, they apparently use meditation to to communicate with animals who are alive and dead. So maybe if you had like an animal for a long time and wanted to communicate and see that it was okay in the afterworld or something, so they can help you do that. Well, she says that horses are the best at connecting with ghosts, which I know our podcast Madeleine loves horses and has a horse, right? At least one.
Yeah, and I actually have a bunch of stories about communicators and that have talked to horses, because
Really?
that's like a lot of people in the horse world get communicators to, talk to them and see, like what exactly is going on,
right?
if they're in pain. It's never like the dead horses or anything like that. It's always ones alive, just because you never know. So after you're done, I'll tell you a few of them because they're pretty cool.
This communicator says that horses are the best at connecting with ghosts because they are herd animals. And so their bonds are very strong and they're very emotional. And I think anybody who's ever been around a horse, like you can tell they're very smart and they are emotional. Like you can just look into their eyes and see that they're very, very connected. But she also says a dog or cat could definitely connect with a spirit, in her professional opinion, and that animals in general are just more open to experiencing like spiritual connections than humans are, because they haven't been culturally conditioned to dismiss those sort of experiences as just your imagination or not real. So whereas someone who was brought up thinking, told ghosts aren't real, this isn't really happen, you might dismiss something, supernatural or paranormal experience or make an excuse for it, whereas an animal hasn't been conditioned that way. So she had some really great points in that article. So thank you for sharing that, Kaitlin. And then the other one we were looking at was by a woman named Lauren Kahn. And she says she wanted to look at the science. And her article is Can Dogs See Ghosts? What the Science Says. And this is really fascinating to me. Humans have been breeding dogs for the last 20 to 40,000 years. So they've been around a long time, and we've valued them as pets for a long time. And clearly it's because they can be extremely smart and sensitive. It's been proven scientifically that they can sense the presence of things like impending weather and even the presence of cancer. And that's why dogs can be used as like diabetic alert dogs, or even, they'll bring them into palliative care homes, and like the dogs will gravitate towards the people who are about to die or whatever. So anywho, she says the question is more about you than your dog. So there's really no scientific studies that prove that paranormal existence or that a dog is related to it, but a good 45% of Americans believe in ghosts. And so essentially it's not about whether ghosts exist, but whether dogs are actually capable of seeing them. And she says, she kind of brings up a few things like that dogs can sense colors and clarity, or I'm sorry, humans are better at sensing colors and clarity, but that dogs can see movements far better than humans. Especially in low light conditions. So it makes sense, if you do believe in ghosts, that a dog would be much better poised to pick up on a quick movement or a change in light, especially if it was pretty much dark in the room where we wouldn't see something a dog or cat might. And we all know dogs can smell really well, but I didn't realize how much better. A dog's sense of smell can be 10,000 to 100,000 times more sensitive than a human's. Dang. So they have what she calls extra smell perception, ESP. And she says she doesn't think it's a stretch to imagine dogs would be able to also pick up ghost scents, or, the scent, not sense, but the actual smell of them. And there's that would kind of be a scientific thing, like that they could smell your husband if your husband died and then visited you, that the dog might be able to pick up on that smell, because he lived with you all those years.
That's why I feel safe like when Z sleeps with me. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, she's like calm and relaxed, so like clearly everything's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It also makes me a little more sympathetic towards our hound dog Trix, who's absolutely psychotic around food, because if she's 10 to 100,000 times more sensitive, then no wonder the poor girl is crazy. She smells that shit so much stronger, and if it smells good to us, it must just drive her crazy. And then this author also says, next time your dog's hair seems to stand on end for no reason, take a look around and try to perceive the cause. scientists have been investigating how dogs sense the world through their skin, the movements of the hair on the dog, and they can detect movement, temperature changes in ways that humans cannot. I will say, and this is absolutely true, my dog, she'll start trembling in the corner or on the couch, and it'll be like sunny outside, and Nick and I are kind of laughing like, Trix, it's not even raining, it's not even a storm, and within 30 minutes it's raining or there's storm or lightning or thunder out of nowhere. And she 100% can sense it coming. A lot of dogs are like that, I think, and they're scared of storms.
Right.
Yeah, Z's like that. We have to put a little thunder jacket on her because she just trembles so much when it's storming.
I'm so scared. So if ghosts exist, she says dogs could very well have such a powerful sense of hearing that they recognize them by sound. So dogs got it going on. They got the smell, the movement detection, and the sound. Yeah, if ghosts exist, they probably can detect them. Pretty amazing.
I'll have to ask AJ, but what's funny is he always like laughs at us doing this podcast because he's like, you need to stop doing that. You're going to like invite something spooky in. And like he's just joking when he says that. But when I'm not here, like he's had like some kind of creepy stuff happen. And I feel like he told me one time that he was in the bed here with Z and like the door to our bedroom was open. And she was just like staring out at nothing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad I wasn't there and that was happening.
Yeah. This woman had a dog, Elmer, who she's convinced was in contact with her husband who died. In the days following the funeral, Elmer would sleep on her late husband's side of the bed, laying his head on the pillow in an almost human-like way. As time went on, Elmer took to running to the front door in the evenings and playfully greeting an unseen visitor. To the widow, it was like her deceased husband was coming home, and that's precisely what it might have been. Whether or not you're a believer, that's a sweet little story. And that every night, maybe he was still coming home and the dog was still greeting him.
So before we get into our real life haunt, I want to tell you about some of the horse psychic stuff. The first one, I'm not exactly sure about exactly what happened, but in a roundabout way, this lady's horse was not doing, maybe it wasn't doing good or eating or something like that. And so she called the horse psychic, and the horse psychic said something along the lines of like, you know, it's not happy with what's going on at the barn. And she's like, you know, I don't understand. Come to find out, her husband was actually having an affair and would meet the significant other at the barn in front of the horses.
My God.
So that was one of them.
And that's like too specific to just be a guess.
Accusation. Yeah, like you have to be really sure.
And then another one, I'm not sure where it took place. It has to be somewhere tropical or something because it involves something. A horse was also not eating. They couldn't figure it out. They would give him his food and it would be gone, but he was losing weight and they could not figure it out. So they called a psychic, you know, what's going on with my horse? The horse told the psychic, well, after they feed me at night, these little men come and take my food. And so she tells them, you know, like, you know, this is what your horse is saying. Does this make any sense? So they set up cameras. And so after they would feed, they have camera footage of little monkeys coming in and taking the horse's food and throwing it. And they would throw it at him in the corner. And he was in the corner and these little monkeys took his food.
Oh, and he was like, they're little men. I don't understand.
Right. He couldn't really, you know. And then the last one, my husband actually witnessed.
This is pretty good evidence so far in favor of these horse communicators.
Yeah.
And my husband is not like one to really give into any of that kind of thing. And he worked for a vet and they had a horse who was just really sick and just kind of like depressed acting. He was a really like expensive horse. So the people were like, you know, let's call the horse psychic, see what's going on. And he told him he wanted to die. He didn't want to live anymore. Aww. And he wanted to commit suicide and that he was going to do it by like sand colic, which is when the horses eat sand, they can't digest it. So it builds up in their stomach and they end up dying because they can't pass it.
Okay. That's
and
horrible.
they were like, that's so crazy because like there's no sand in the stalls or anything like that. And he said like a few weeks later, the horse died. And when they did the autopsy and cut him open, he was full of sand.
That is so sad.
That one is very sad.
Why was
But-
it suicidal horse?
Yeah, I don't know.
Also, I think that says so much about like the emotions animals feel too that we just are so unaware of, that they would even be able to comprehend the idea of suicide.
Right. So our real life hot is from Ohio. Her name is Christine Fulton, and she said that she's got several paranormal stories and that her family actually owns a house that was built in 1804 and that it has secret rooms and just a lot of like spirit activity, and that they've actually had the house blessed twice because of how haunted it is. So check it out.
The house was built in 1850 in Monroeville, Ohio. It's old-fashioned with a winding wood staircase that led to the upstairs. Though it looked small from the outside, it was quite large with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a big yard, everything exciting parents could want. My parents, who were renting at the time, were ready to buy their first home as they were expecting their second child. They knew the owners who happened to live next door to the empty home and across the street from my parents' rental house. They offered my parents the house, and they took them up on it. We moved in shortly after. They bought the house in 1985, which made me 5 years old. The first paranormal experience began shortly after we moved in. It started with seeing apparitions out of the corner of our eyes, and we could hear things we couldn't quite explain. Then it grew more serious. I began having night terrors, or at least that's what my parents thought they were. To me, it was a real experience, and to this day, I believe it was still a real experience. One night, I heard a noise coming from inside my closet. I was terrified, as any child should be. I pulled the covers up to my chest and stared into the darkness of the closet, when suddenly the light turned on, and what I would describe as a demon peered back at me. He had an evil, toothy smile on his face. I screamed continuously until my parents came to my rescue. When they arrived, the closet light was still on. Another time, I had fallen extremely ill, to the point I couldn't walk on my own. I woke up that night and happened to see a lady dressed in an early 1900s frilly puffed blouse and long skirt. She had her hair pinned up, and she was rocking back and forth slowly in the rocking chair that was next to my bed. She looked up at me and smiled. She told me to go back to sleep, and that everything would be okay. I nodded and drifted off to sleep. I woke up a short time later, only to be extremely thirsty. Suddenly, there were 3 people on each side of me, all wearing different era clothing. They picked me up and carried me down the stairs. When I woke up the next morning, I was lying on the couch with a glass of water next to me. Everyone has at some point had an experience in this house. My mom woke up one night to hands reaching out for her from the ceiling. It scared her tremendously. She ended up sleeping on the couch for a little while after that. My younger sister moved into my room when I moved out, and to this day can recall hearing a demon talking to her from the closet. She had no idea about my experience, so it's quite interesting to see her have something similar happen. One night, my sisters and I were in our bedroom, taunting the spirits to prove to us that they were really there. The bedroom light suddenly turned off, and all 3 of us were left screaming for our parents. The history of the house is quite interesting. When I was about 16, a married couple from Orange County, California stopped by because their relatives had lived there in the 1900s. They showed us old photos of the family, and guess what? The woman in the rocking chair was the same woman in the photos. The house had been part of the Underground Railroad. In the early 2000s, my dad did some remodeling. He planned to turn our living room into a bedroom. When he knocked down the wall, he found a secret room that was hidden behind the winding staircase. Inside it were old clothes, old money, and old newspapers from the 1800s. We believe that they used to hide people in there at one point to keep them safe. After all of these experiences, my mom decided to have the house blessed. The first time it was blessed, they made the comment that there were so many spirits dwelling in the home that they had to come back and do it again. Since then, it's been pretty peaceful, except the upstairs. Last Christmas, we visited the upstairs only to see a dark shadow, and I'm talking the blackest of the black shadows, move quickly across the hallway. You could feel the evil in it, and I'm certain that demon still hides up there. My parents still live there, though they stay downstairs for the most part. Nobody goes upstairs anymore, and when they do, They describe it as entering an entirely different atmosphere, as they get goosebumps and get that bad feeling that something or someone is watching them.
It's creepy.
Wow.
Blessing it twice. I mean, that says a lot about just how much is happening there, I think.
It's crazy because I love old homes. And in my head, I'm like, oh, that would be like the perfect thing, like a house from the 1800s. And then
And kind of renovate it, and yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, maybe it's not a good idea.
Maybe asking for ghosts. People.
That's kind of cool about the secret rooms and stuff, though.
Right. Well, if you guys have your own stories that you want to share with us, please email us. Please email us at the Unrest Podcast. Oh my gosh.
Again, the Unrest Podcast at gmail.com. Don't bother calling. We're not accepting your calls anymore. But we do love you.
Unrest in peace.